Hi friends, welcome back to Brilliant Blue Reviews. My name is Heather, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of the movie The Choral, which is C-H-O-R-A-L. It's after a choral society, a singing group in Great Britain in 1916 is what we're dealing with here, not coral like a coral reef that you would find in the ocean, okay? First of all, I want to apologize in advance for the horror that is my left eye, okay? Sorry about that. It's really scary. Please forgive me for the fact that my left eye looks like something out of either an Edgar Allan Poe novel or a sci-fi movie. This was also present in my last video, the review of Greenland 2, but I was wearing my glasses, so it was a little bit more difficult to see it. It's pretty bad, and it hasn't improved at all in 4 days, 5 days, 5 days. This happened, I'm filming this on Tuesday. This happened on Friday. Basically, very simple explanation. It does not hurt at all. I completely forget that it's there until I look in the mirror. I was bending down at work to put something away, and so I was kind of bent down, and I sneezed really hard. There was split opinion at work among my coworkers. A whole bunch of people thought I was going to go blind or die and needed to rush to the ER immediately. Other people who've had this happen to them were calm as can be and said, "Oh, you just burst a blood vessel in your eye. It's fine. It'll reabsorb. You're fine." That's what it is. I'm fine. But I'm sorry that it looks like this. It's pretty creepy. So anyway, that out of the way, The Choral is you've probably not even heard of this movie. The only reason I even knew about it or knew what it was because I did see a preview or a trailer for it at some point. And I want to say the only place I saw the trailer was probably on one of the movie trailer YouTube channels that I watch. There's a couple different trailer channels that I subscribe to stay on top of what movies are being released. It did not come out around where I live. Once again, I'm in the Twin Cities. I had to come up here to get my windshield replaced on my new car that I bought because I bought the car here in Minnesota, and another tangent. The dealership actually cracked the windshield when they were scraping ice off of it, and so they knew about it. It was their responsibility. They already had it scheduled to be replaced, but then I came and bought the car before they could do that. So then I had to come back up here so that they could replace the windshield. But anyway, that's what I'm doing up here. Okay, so while I was here, I decided to go to this movie. Now, why am I going to some small little unknown movie put out by the BBC and Sony Pictures? It's very, very British. Hardly anybody is going to have even heard of this movie. There were very few people in the movie, although more than I was expecting. However, I was definitely the youngest person by far in the movie theater. I think there were 3 couples, or 2 couples and 1 woman by herself, and they were all like in their 60s or 70s, maybe even 80s. The reason I like to go to movies like this is because oftentimes, especially when it comes to like the movies that win awards, we miss films that are kind of special and really neat or very well done films that don't get a lot of attention and that don't end up being as popular or sell as many tickets. But I like to see them to, first of all, just see something different, and secondly, to bring attention to these films that are oftentimes hidden gems. My video on the 11 underrated films, great films that you didn't see in 2025, right up here, really took off. People were obviously very interested in what films they had not heard of or movies they had not seen or didn't come out around them or whatever. So I like to try to see movies like this as often as I can because most of the time they're really good. So The Choral is a movie set in a fictional Yorkshire, England town in 1916. It kind of seems like is based on a true story, but it's not. It was literally just the writer's imagination. But he was pulling things from real life in England at that time. So this is in the middle of World War I. The main premise of this is that there was this choral society in this fictional town in England, and this was something that really did happen, that was using singing and music as a way to have community, camaraderie, and bring hope and joy to the people that were left behind during World War I, when so many young men were being shipped off to the war and coming back injured, traumatized, maimed, or dead, So it was a very solemn time for many people in Europe and the UK and the United States, for that matter, and Canada. And this just is an example of something that communities at that time would do to kind of cope with this very difficult period in history. The premise is that it's a fictitious town with a mill that employs a lot of people in Yorkshire in England, and it's 1916, and there's a lot of stuff about World War I, and some men and boys have already been fighting the war, some have already died, and then there's some boys in the choir that actually get sent off to the war at the very end of the movie. Three of them. And they just look so young. It just freaks me out that countries send boys that young. They're not mature enough to have to deal with death and everything. And it's kind of horrifying when you think about it. But this movie was not sad, and it was not overly dramatic. It was actually quite light and cheerful and pretty funny too. It did get a little bit boring or slow in spots. It got better as it went along. There wasn't a lot to the plot. I mean, it was really just about this small city in England that they had this choral society before the war, but now they were facing a couple of issues. Number one was they didn't have enough singers, because so many of the people who had been in the choral society were men who had gotten shipped off to the war, okay? Secondly, they were out their choral director because he had gotten drafted and sent off to the war, okay? So they needed a new director. And then the other problem that they had is that they couldn't find a piece or something to actually do, because most of the great composers that they wanted to use were German, and nobody in the community supported them singing anything by German composers. So like somebody actually literally threw a brick through the window when they were rehearsing originally, because they didn't want them to do any of the stuff by most of the composers that are well known, because they were all German. So in this movie, they've got to kind of solve these various problems. They have to recruit enough people to sing. They have to get a new choir director, which is Ralph Fiennes' character, and his name is Dr. Guthrie. Can't remember what his first name was. They call him Dr. Guthrie through the whole thing. And then they need to find a piece by a non-German composer that they can do and produce and have something to sing. So they end up doing The Dream of Gerontius, I think is how it's pronounced, which is an actual piece of music by British composer Edward Elgar, okay, who was a real person. And in the movie, Edward Elgar is a character. He comes up near the end of the movie. But they talk about him through the whole thing, because they finally decide, we could do this piece by Elgar. And so Ralph Fiennes' character has to write to the composer and ask permission to produce this piece, for the choral society. And he gives his permission. But over the course of them rehearsing and doing stuff with it, they end up changing it completely. And so then they run into a problem where when Edward Elgar really comes, because one of the people in the choir wrote to him, because he was being given an honorary degree at a university in Manchester, which was close by, and so he decided to come and see what they were doing, because they were, putting on one of his pieces that he had written. And when he finds out that they've changed like almost everything about it, he gets really upset, and he says that they don't have his permission anymore, which means that they don't have licensing, which means they cannot sell tickets. But they still decide, this is kind of a spoiler because it's at the very end of the movie, they decide to go ahead and put it on anyway and just not sell tickets and just like invite all their family and friends and the community and everything. So that's what they end up doing. So it's basically just the story of them going from, oh, we have this choral society, but we don't have enough people, and we don't have anything to sing, and we don't have a choir director, to the end where they get enough people to sing, they find something to sing, they get a new choir director, which is Ralph Fiennes, and how they get around the whole licensing issue. So that's basically the plot. So it doesn't sound like it's that interesting, but they did such a nice job with it. So it has a really terrific cast, and there's a lot of people in it that I've seen before. I want to say a couple of them were in Downton Abbey. Or maybe Titanic. I don't know. There were some older actors, older men and women, that I definitely recognized, but I cannot think of anybody's names. And I even watched the credits at the end. I stayed all through the credits. And one thing is, it said it was produced in conjunction with the London Theatre Company. So I almost think that a lot of these singers and actors that were in this, like the extras, if you will, filling out the choral society, were actual professional theatrical performers that they got from the London Theatre Company and were using to make this movie. I looked through the credits at the end and I didn't recognize any of the names except for Ralph Fiennes. Now, I really like Ralph Fiennes. I've talked about Ralph Fiennes before. I went on and on about how much I love Ralph Fiennes last year or at the end of 2024, when I reviewed Conclave, which is the last movie I saw him in. I really like Ralph Fiennes, and I like some of his older stuff, pre-Harry Potter, if you will. End of the Affair, love that movie with Julianne Moore. The English Patient is so good. I like the parts before he gets burned in the plane crash and he's with Kristen Scott Thomas and the whole thing with that. He's done other stuff too, but I just really like Ralph Fiennes. I think he's a really great actor. He's very restrained in his acting. Now, this was a very, very British movie. Even I, who has lived in England, had a little trouble in a couple spots understanding what they were saying. Because not only was the British accent something to get past, but they were also speaking as people spoke in 1916. So this is 110 years ago. Wow, that blows your mind. World War I was 110 years ago? Is that right? It is. Oh, geez, that's freaking me out. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right. They're speaking in a way that we don't speak anymore. And they did a very good job with it. The acting was very, very good. And like I said, this was actually very light and bright. It wasn't visually dark. It wasn't tonally dark in any way. It was actually very uplifting and cheerful and funny in spots. There were some really funny lines. This was rated R. And I'm going to tell you two main reasons why it was rated R. And one was very surprising to me. One reason was just a lot of adult themes. So the physical and emotional damage that happens to men who fight in a war. They would show like all these happy, healthy soldiers going off on the train. And then they had this one scene where then the train, it's like a few months later, and all these wounded soldiers with missing limbs get off. And, you know, they're all bandaged up and stuff. Also, just like there's at the beginning, the one teenage boy, his job is to go around and deliver the telegrams from the king telling people that their loved one has died in the war. And so you see him going around and delivering those. It's done in like a lighthearted way, actually. He's riding around on his bike with his friend, and the friend has to like step aside while he goes and delivers the telegram, and then the people cry and shut the door. And then they move on and they're like chatting, you know. And then there's some other things like Ralph Fiennes' character and also the pianist that accompanies the choir are both gay. They don't hide it. Everybody knows that they're gay. They're not a couple. But Ralph Fiennes had a partner or someone he loved who was German. So that was a complication too. Ralph Fiennes' character had lived in Nuremberg in Germany for a number of years, like until the war broke out, and then he'd come back to England. And so a lot of people had suspicions about him or didn't think that he was okay to be doing this because they're like, is he a German sympathizer? And then the fact that he was gay was kind of like unsettling for people. So that was one thing. There were just a lot of adult situational things like that. But again, light in tone, okay? And then the other thing was, oh my gosh, there was so much sex. Now, not anything shown really. There is one scene where a young man does strip completely naked, but they only show like his bare back. And they do show his bare behind as he walks out of the room. He picks up his clothes and is carrying his clothes and walks out of the room, and you see him fully nude from behind for a second. So there was actually a remarkably lot of sexual topics, I guess I would say. And it was very tastefully handled and very interesting to see like all the ways that sex was affecting people in this situation. Like, sex is a big part of life, and I've never seen a movie before that like actually like tackled it the way this one did. And so it was just a mature thing that your kids necessarily wouldn't want to be seeing or whatever. So I mean, it was interesting how they did it, and I don't want to say too much without giving stuff away, but there was just a whole bunch of stuff that had to do with sex, but without showing sex. You know, there weren't sex scenes, there weren't even people like kissing really or anything like that, but it came up a lot. So that was kind of interesting. So that would be why it's rated R. It's basically topical reasons, because it's not like people were swearing or anything. I mean, it was very formal time, and it was very proper and very British. So, you know, they're having tea and they're, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. That was something I was not expecting in the movie, but it was cool because it gave it more life, I guess, if you will. I really was kind of debating for a while because there were some slower parts where it was kind of losing me a little bit, and it might have just been because I was tired. But by the end, I realized, no, the quality of the acting in this, the direction, just everything, the cinematography of it and everything was really lovely and very well done. And so I'm going to give this movie, The Choral, a 4 stars out of 5. Again, it was not dark in tone. It was not dark visually. It was very bright and positive and everything. And it really was just about how these people really enjoyed singing and wanted to sing as a group at this particular time in history during World War I, because it gave them hope and it gave them something to look forward to and something to do and something to bring them together. That's really all it was about, honestly. So it was kind of a sweet movie, little small movie that I didn't even realize had come out anywhere. And I saw that it was showing at this one theater nearby here. I remembered seeing a preview about it, and I said, oh, I think I'd kind of like to go see that and go check that out. That was my review of The Choral, starring Ralph Fiennes. It's produced by the BBC and Sony Pictures. If it's still in theaters, it's going to be hard to find. This was the only theater in the whole Twin Cities that I saw it at. It had one showtime today. That's it. So if it's still in theaters, get out and catch it now if you want to see it in theaters. Otherwise, I imagine it'll come to streaming eventually. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time.